Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Madeline Chassel. I'm the SPI Policy Director, and this is our monthly coordinating call for the secular movement. We at SPI just want to give you, as we always do, an international hotspot of the month. Actually, let me refresh this page because it's no longer the Zika virus that we're talking about today. We're talking about a letter that we are sending to Italy, to the president and to the president of the Italian Chamber of Deputies. And this letter would be to advocate for a bare minimum of legal protection for same-sex couples in the form of the Civil Union Bill, and the number is mentioned here in the letter. You can read the entire letter on the agenda or on our website. I've linked here to the sign-on letter content, which can also be found on our main site under the Coalition tab, Advocacy Campaigns. And you'll hear more about that in just a few moments. But before we get started, I want to see if we have our CEO, Edwina Rogers, here with us. Edwina, are you on the call?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Wonderful. Hello, Edwina.
Hi.
Okay, great. So is there anything you want to tell us before we introduce our speakers for the day?
Yeah, we have an exciting agenda as always, and I'm glad I can make it this month. Sorry I missed last month when I was giving this speech in northern Florida. So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you, Madeline, because I know we've got 3 speakers, and with any time left at the end, I'll talk about a new project that we're working on to create secular STEM clubs in schools called STEM Can.
That's wonderful.
We'll save me for the end,
Okay,
and I
good.
know Hugo's planning to call in also, just FYI, and give a report about a conference he covered for SPI in Poland.
Wonderful. Okay, so you'll be the pièce de résistance, and we'll see if we can get some info on those conferences at the end. But in the meantime, our first members in our project and member spotlight are Emily Young and Uttam Naraula. I hope I'm pronouncing your names correctly. Are you both here? So just to give a brief introduction, and we may circle back, Young and Naraula are team members and executive director of the Society for Humanism in Nepal. And if they're not yet with us, we can circle back. I will remind everyone who's on the call, if you're on the phone only, please press *6 to unmute yourself at any time. Right now, you are all on mute to keep the sound in control. So I'll just remind you, press *6 if you're joining us from the phone and you'd like to speak now. Okay, good. So for the time being, and we'll hopefully get those 2 with us later on the call, I'm going to move on to Jason Frye, who is a regular guest on our call. And Frye, I would love you to tell us about current and upcoming advocacy campaign letters like the one we saw in our international hotspot. Jason, are you there? Remember to press *6.
There we are.
There you are.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Perfect. So there's quite a few upcoming advocacy campaigns, one of which was addressed on the agenda, but Justin Trudeau did a lot of good work for us, and the Canadian Office of Religious Freedom closed its doors the other day. So that's out of the picture, but several of the advocacy campaigns are directly related to each other. A lot of them have to deal with states in the United States. There are ones that deal with religious freedom laws that have come up. There's a couple on transgender issues. There is a situation brewing in Texas with reproductive freedom, 2 cases of which have hit the US Supreme Court. And I guess I'll get started. So in the United Kingdom, there has been a bit of a problem with education, and that we noticed it because of Jason Heap of the United Coalition of Reason alerted us to the fact that the chief inspector of schools was speaking at a Christian event, and he said that with materialism and secularism on the rise, anti-religious sentiment is prevalent and Christian students need to stand up for themselves. And you think about that and it makes you pause for a second. But looking further into it, there are additional issues that need our attention, desperately need our attention. One relates to what the British Humanist Association did for the Fair Admissions Campaign, which was this big study. I'll email in the report on that. I have a PDF on it. It's called An Unholy Mess. Essentially, in Britain, you have a choice of schools you send your children to, and with public schools, publicly funded schools, they cannot discriminate based on religion or lack thereof. But what the British Humanist Association found by studying hundreds of these schools is that there's near universal non-compliance with this. On top of that, there has been campaigns by the National Secular Society and British Humanist Association to increase equality for free thinkers, humanists, atheists, and the State Secretary of Education is an evangelical Christian, and she's not too happy about that. There are certain graduation requirements in religious studies, and they used to have humanism listed, then they took it away. And then the British Humanist Association sponsored 3 parents to sue, and it went to the High Court, which is Britain's Supreme Court, and the High Court ruled that they can't do that. Well, after that happened, State Secretary of Education Nicky Morgan put out new guidelines, which didn't include humanism, but included studying at least 2 world religions. The letter is already out, I believe, so you guys can look at that. But part of the letter was asking for the government to investigate this, do an investigation to ensure compliance with the education codes, which says that there has to be parity, and the High Court says there has to be parity, as well as looking into the compliance with school admissions to not discriminate based on being a member of a minority religion or humanist or of no religion whatsoever. So that's one advocacy campaign that's out right now. Now I want to go on to Religious Freedom Restoration Acts. This is an interesting situation. Just a little bit of background for people who are unfamiliar with this. Back in the 1970s in the United States, there were 2 court cases that reached the Supreme Court. That one involved a Seventh-day Adventist who wanted to sue for unemployment because they changed her work schedule and she couldn't work on Saturdays. And there was another dealing with Amish people who wanted to take their children out of public school by the 8th grade. And what the Supreme Court came up with was this compelling interest, substantial burden test. And then 20 years later, there was a situation that happened in Oregon where 2 employees of a drug treatment facility were members of the Native American Church, and they used peyote as part of their sacrament. There was a zero tolerance policy at the drug treatment facility, and Oregon considered peyote to be, I believe, a Schedule I drug. So you really couldn't do peyote legally. And it went to the Supreme Court, and beforehand, there was this burden test. And the Supreme Court came out saying that the drug laws were neutral and generally applicable, so they struck down the substantial burden test. Well, later that year, Congress put out the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and that reinstated the compelling interest substantial burden test. On top of that, it included additional language that said that your religious exercise didn't have to be central or compulsory to a major religion. So it was rather ambiguous. And then a Catholic church wanted to expand their church, and they were in a historic district part of town. The city said no. The Catholic church said, well, this is inhibiting our religious exercise. So then they sued and went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court eventually ruled that the Religious Freedom Restoration Act didn't apply to states, only to the federal government. So 20 states between 1997 and 2015 adopted Religious Freedom Restoration Acts. Since 2015, immediately after the Hobby Lobby case, 16 states have put religious freedom restoration bills into their state legislatures. Several of them haven't passed. 3 of them have: Arkansas, Indiana, and Mississippi. A few of them have been vetoed, including Arizona and most recently Georgia. The path towards this recently has focused extensively on LGBT people. It's a way to undermine established civil rights legislation in court cases. You may have seen everything out there about bakers and other small stores and that, but they say it's in the name of religious freedom. They say things in there such as clergy don't have to marry people they don't want to marry, which they don't have to do that. But there are other effects associated with these Religious Freedom Restoration Acts, and it goes back to another court case from 1983, and this is a way to cover their ass, essentially. It's because Bob Jones University had a discriminatory dating policy, and the government took away their tax-exempt status. So buried within these particular Religious Freedom Restoration Acts, these state ones, because the city of Flores versus Bourne, our City of Bourne versus Flores case saying that it didn't apply to the states, as well as the Obergefell decision for marriage equality, as well as the Hobby Lobby decision and the Bob Jones decision, it puts that ability of religious privilege to come in where people say they're being substantially burdened with that vague language of anything goes, not compulsory or central, and it protects the liability of losing your tax-exempt status, and it also offers an easier way to receive remedy at the court level. Well, the other day, Georgia, the House of Representatives of Georgia passed that particular piece of legislation, and Governor Nathan Deal, some say it's due to the threat of Disney and other movie companies pulling out and corporate pressure. Other people say, including Nathan Deal, that Georgia is a welcoming place and that type of legislation doesn't belong in Georgia, and that piece of legislation wouldn't do anything necessary that wasn't already in place. But Governor Nathan Deal vetoed that piece of legislation, and that letter has already gone out. There's a letter that I'm working on right now about Mississippi. Mississippi just passed that, and the governor just signed it into law. And it's a rather disturbing piece of legislation compared to the original Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And you'll be seeing that soon, hopefully. And I was going to be putting out a letter on the Canadian Office of Religious Freedom, but there's no need to do that now because it no longer exists. And moving on to transgender issues. Excuse me one second, let me find his name. Okay, perfect. Mike Honda, a representative, where is he from? I have it right here, there. Mike Honda from California, who I believe is on the LGBT Equality Caucus of the House or Congress, something like that. Representative Honda put out a piece of legislation which is right now, excuse me, I'm looking at my notes. It's been referred to the subcommittee on the Constitution and Civil Justice. What it's called is Support for Supportive Transgender Awareness, because people in the United States who are transgender, they encounter a lot of social and sometimes legal resistance. Especially people who are transgender, who are below the poverty line, people of color who are transgender. And so Mike Honda put out this piece of legislation in order to support awareness. And what happened in North Carolina the other day with House Bill 2 is a clear indication of why this piece of legislation is necessary. I believe that letter has already gone out, and I'm working on the North Carolina letter. What happened in North Carolina, it's in line with these Religious Freedom Restoration Acts. It's a law, they're saying LGBT, but it's not based on sexual orientation. It's specifically a gender issue. It's specifically a transgender issue. What it is it's for single and multiple occupancy restrooms. And it says that your biological sex must match the designation of that particular restroom. And there's some problems with that. The main problem comes down to the fact of, well, what does North Carolina define as biological sex? Another problem is, how are they going to enforce it? There's no penalties listed within the law itself either. And they say that your biological sex is based upon the sex listed on your birth certificate. And it's a strange piece of legislation. The ACLU is suing on it. There's seems to be a flood of corporations leaving North Carolina. The governor of New York banned unnecessary travel to North Carolina. I'm putting out this letter in the next couple days, but this is directly targeting transgender individuals. And it's profoundly disturbing. It's profoundly disturbing. And it doesn't make any sense, considering that if they're going to be doing this based upon keeping some kind of consistency with your biological sex, well, if your biological sex says your birth certificate, there are places where transgender individuals can change the sex on their birth certificate. On top of that, it doesn't say your American birth certificate. And there's certain countries that have a third gender, and there's intersexed individuals as well. And top of that, the last thing about it is this leaves wide accommodations available where they can have a temporary designation of the opposite sex to use that facility. So it's an election year. You can intuitively understand why they did this. And then the next particular piece of, there are two more that I want to bring up. One is in Texas. Texas has some of the worst anti-choice legislation and laws. There was a situation that occurred just last week or a week and a half ago, and it relates to their omnibus abortion bill. Part of it is called the fetal pain law. What anti-choice activists put out is this fallacy that fetuses can feel pain at 20 weeks. It's just like their fallacy that abortion causes breast cancer. And owing to that, they say that you can't have an abortion after 20 weeks. There was a situation where a married couple who wanted to have a child desperately experienced complications with pregnancy. And they had to endure 4 days of trauma because the wife was miscarrying. And in another state, a doctor would have induced labor because the child was not going to be viable. But there, because of the 20-week abortion law, they had to wait until she miscarried. And that brings the human element to this. This goes back to another Supreme Court case. In 1992, the Supreme Court said that you can't substantially burden people who seek abortion services. And the definition of substantial burden is coming into play in Whole Women's Health versus Hellerstadt. And alongside this, a college in East Texas Baptist University, is a party to the current RFRA case, Religious Freedom Restoration Act case, allowing non-church religious organizations to receive an exemption from the Affordable Care Act contraception mandate. So I just sent a rough draft of that letter to Edwina, and that is out there right now. It's going to be interesting to see what the court has to say, but Texas is chock full of profoundly disturbing anti-choice legislation. Beyond this, two last things that happened. What we've done over the last 6 months is we've done a concerted effort to aid the bloggers in Bangladesh. And unfortunately, one of the bloggers, I hope I pronounce his name correctly, Nazimuddin Samad, was murdered today. So we lost another blogger today, just today. He was stabbed to death today, like the other people who were just tragically murdered. And this brings home another situation that Atheist Alliance International is working on, that we've stepped on the project as well. And that is gaining asylum for two apostates, an Iranian expatriate and a Pakistani expatriate. One was in Malaysia and the other was in India, and they were denied asylum. And the thing about Pakistan and Iran is that blasphemy and apostasy are punishable by death. Beyond that, the United States has an office, the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, that does a lot of work to study, analyze, and try to do something about people who receive negative social treatment as well as legal penalties who are apostates. They're called prisoners of belief, and they've documented executions, they've documented imprisonment, and this is a clear case of persecution. To receive asylum, not every country is party to certain treaties. Malaysia is not party to the UN Declaration of Human Rights or the international, I believe they're also not party to the international protocol on refugee status, but other countries are, and other countries tend to step up. And part of receiving asylum is that you have to demonstrate a well-founded fear of persecution. And if people in your country are being executed and have been executed and documented have been executed for being atheist, you have a well-established fear of persecution. And so I just sent another rough draft of an advocacy letter to Edwina this morning on this particular issue. So to wrap up, we have issues in the United Kingdom with schools and the fair treatment of children and equality there. We have issues with religious freedom. The Canadian issue is a moot point now, but the governor of Georgia vetoed a RFRA. The governor of Mississippi just signed in a RFRA. We have transgender issues across the country. Mike Honda of California just put out that piece of legislation. It's in committee right now, and I think we should support it to increase awareness of transgender Americans. And then there's that anti-trans piece of legislation, HB2, another HB2. The Texas Omnibus Bill was HB2 also, but HB2 North Carolina. And we have another blogger murdered today, an asylum issue that we're working on, and Texas. So if there are any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Hi, it's Edwina.
Hi.
That's a fabulous wrap up, Jason. So yes, the Honda letter on the piece of legislation is already signed by everybody, all the groups that were willing to sign it, and it's already gone. The thank you letter to the governor of Georgia, we were really surprised that he vetoed it, but very grateful. That thank you letter is still open, and groups can still sign on it until the end of this week. We sent out a reminder just late Tuesday evening to remind everybody to get on that letter. And the other letters that you've mentioned, they're done by you, and they're going through production now. So we should see a couple of those by Tuesday, and they'll be open for 2 weeks. But thank you very much. That was very informative.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jason, and thank you, Edwina. There's some very powerful issues happening, and I'm so glad that we're on top of them at the very least. I would like to open the floor to John Kirbow. He's an ethnographer and cultural specialist that has joined us on many a call, and he is going to speak to us about updates on his ongoing research in the Middle East. John, are you there? And remember, you can press *6 to unmute yourself, or you can click your microphone button. I helped you out, John. Hello, are you there? John? I have you on unmute. Are you with us, John? I can barely hear you, John, but you are there. Can you speak a little louder?
Yeah, I do apologize. It might be my phone that's a little bit of trouble. So if any time I fade out, feel free to let me know.
You're still a little faint, so if there's a way to just increase your volume or speak a little closer to the microphone, that might work.
Yeah, what about now? Is this better?
I'm having a little trouble hearing you. Should we circle back with you?
Yeah, this is it's a problem with my phone, and it's absolutely infuriating. I do apologize.
That's fine. It happens. It happens, John. So I'll give you a minute to sort that out, and I'll ask one.
Or I can try to call you, John, and conference you in if you think that would help.
Yeah, that might help. I'm on the phone right now. Let me see if I can use my microphone on the conference call. Can anybody hear me right now?
Are you online, or are you just using your cell phone?
So I'm actually both. I'm online, but my microphone doesn't seem to work. And I'm also using my cell phone.
Sounds tricky. I will let you and Miss Rogers look into that maybe offline, and I'll go ahead and do a brief overview of our fellows while you're working on that, okay?
Right. Just one more time. Is this any closer to anybody?
You're starting to sound a little clearer. I think if you spoke at a volume and projected, we'd all be able to hear your presentation. Do you want to go ahead and just speak very loudly?
Yeah. So is this better?
We can hear you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And I really do apologize. This is very annoying, and it's really hard to, So
just keep projecting for us, and we'll be fine.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to just take about 5 minutes and rehash two major areas. Some of you have heard about this before, and I'm going to go into some specifics. And the two broad areas here, one is about bringing science and free thinking into our political discourse in America, sort of bridging science and free thought with American politics. And the idea there is that the ideology on the left and the right is a very vocal talk about very controversial issues, from mass incarceration and drug reform and sex education and police communities like that. These are usually handled through ideology. And
John, I'm so sorry. I don't know if it's just me, John, but I want us to be able to hear you. So unless you want to speak very loudly, we should come back to you, because I can barely hear you.
I'm going to have some words with Frye.
Yeah. John, do you want to just give me your cell phone number, and then I'll call you and conference you in, and let's see how that is?
Yeah, here, I'll send you a text right now.
Okay, so let me come back to you guys.
Yeah.
Okay, we tried. I do want to see quickly if we have Emily Young and Uttam Narala here. Emily, are you with us? And if you are and you're on the phone, please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Madeline, they were going to try to do it through online with GoToMeeting because they're both in Nepal right now.
Sure.
And they were very excited to come on and talk about their new program. And we've had 4 or 5 emails confirming it, but we didn't know for sure they would have internet and everything would be working.
Okay, so that must be what's happening. So, okay, we will get an update from them maybe next month. And I'll just go ahead
or I can give it,
Sure.
I can give it in the wrap up in the end if they're not able to get through, because they've explained it to me. And as a matter of fact, we put a little summary in the agenda. You have it in the agenda. So,
of course.
But we'll just wait and see if they're able to get through, and I can include it in the wrap up in the end.
Okay, wonderful. And in the meantime, I'm going to quickly do a little fellows overview as I run the Fellows Corner and give you some highlights from this month's activity with some of our very active fellows. One is A.C. Grayling, a very renowned name in philosophy, and he was recently interviewed by an Australian broadcasting corporation about his family's move in 1968 from Africa to the UK, and of course its impact on his personal development. Marty Klein, who is an expert in human sexuality, wrote an article for Psychology Today which analyzed the debate about pornography and whether it demeans women. It's a very interesting article about the division of power in sexual relationships, worth a read, and it is linked to in the agenda here. Ella Minea of Yemeni and Swiss dual nationalities is one of our fellows. She's a political scientist, a writer, and a human rights activist. And she's also an associate professor of politics in Zurich at Zurich University and a consultant for Swiss government agencies and international human rights organizations. And along with other Middle Eastern activists, she was recently a signatory to a letter to President Obama, which asked him to put human rights first during his upcoming visit to the Middle East. John McWhorter is a very renowned name in linguistics and contributes a lot to discussions in race and politics. And he recently wrote an article about free speech on college campuses, especially as it relates to debates about racism and marginalized groups. Taslima Nasreen, also very renowned and a very active voice for women in the Muslim community. She recently she lauded Kerala High Court Justice B. Kamal Pasha for asking why Muslim women can't have as many husbands as men when men enjoy this privilege in the Muslim religion. And the question, of course, reflects laws under all Islamic states, which is something that Taslima is constantly putting into question, and it continues to be criticized as heavily biased against women. You can find all of this information on our website. We always follow our fellows and blog about them. And in our newsletters, there's always an update or two. You can always follow this link that is in the agenda to register for our daily news clips, which I orchestrate to cover news bites from around the world that are coming in related to our fellows, science, politics, and religion. So hopefully John and Edwina are connecting offline, but I know that I have Hugo with us. So if you are here, Hugo, can you talk to us now? Can you put yourself off mute?
Can you hear me?
Yes, please tell us everything, Hugo.
Okay, hello everybody. Well, I'm sorry, my voice is not the best because I'm going through a flu, but I just returned from Poland where I participated in the name of the institute at the Atheist Days and a number of events that they organized in Warsaw. They happen every year, and it's been a very interesting and compelling week. So I met a number of people from all over Europe and beyond. Poland itself is going through a very tough situation, especially for free thinkers and atheists, because they have a government that is extremely right-wing Catholic, sort of. If Donald Trump were Catholic and won the elections, you can imagine what type of situation they would be. They are going through now. So we even marched all together for the defense of right of women, because the government wants to derogate the abortion law that it's still left, whatever is left of the right of abortion that they've had before. And well, I did a presentation on, I did two presentations actually. One of them was on the real self of Pope Francis, with his history and his political views and political activities, which I can later pass on to you. And the second day, I did a presentation on the Secular Policy Institute to make people know about it and to promote it. So I think we'll expect a number of more people joining, or more organizations joining the institute in the next few weeks. There was an interesting number of speakers there. It was crowded. Also, the activities were pretty crowded, so it was very nice to be there. And there was, I met some interesting people, as I said before, like Jamila Ben Habib. I don't know if you've heard of her, but I think she would be a very interesting asset for the institute. She wrote, she's from Algeria, but she lives in Canada, and is a very well-known writer in French language. Her last book has been After Charlie is the name, and it's a very interesting book. So she campaigns for secularization and rights of women in the Islamic world. I had the chance also to talk to the representative of the Central Laïque from Belgium, who is also acting as the European Humanist Federation delegate for at the conference, and they are working on an initiative all over Europe to start a procedure against Hungary, because Hungary has a government even worse than the one in Poland, and extremely racist. So they are the European Humanist Federation started this procedure, and it's trying to collect 1 million signatures for that. Then I had a meeting with the Rationalist TV from Poland, and there will probably be a. Hello, are you hearing me? I don't know if you still hear me.
Yes, Hugo, you're fine.
Okay.
Okay. There is a web TV channel, Rationalist TV, very interesting, and our friend Andrei Dominichak is the one who runs it, so they are also interested in joining the institute. And well, there was the whole spectrum of free thinkers, from Right to Die to women's rights activists to rationalists. So it was actually a very, very good experience to be there, and people were very much interested in our job and what the Secular Policy Institute stands for, because something that comes from across the Atlantic is not usual to be known here in Europe, and so this is appealing as well. So having a cross-Atlantic or a transatlantic agreement for working for secularism is a very good thing, and they were very much interested in what's being done. So that's basically it. There were also people coming from Palestine and from different neighboring regions of Europe, discussing the issues of secularism and the right to dissent in religious predominant societies. So, well, I'm open to deepen in any aspect you think it would be interesting to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. I was so glad that you were able to represent us at that conference, and thanks for staying on top of everything. Does anyone have any questions for Hugo? All right. Well, yes.
Madeline, I got John, and his volume is working now.
Yeah,
Perfect.
can anybody hear me okay?
We can hear you loud and clear. That's perfect. So thank you, Hugo. And John, please take the floor.
You're welcome.
Sure, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry again, everyone. So yeah, I'll just be about 4 or 5 minutes, and I'm just going to rehash 2 main areas. Some of you all are familiar, and for those who aren't, I'll go over them. The first one is about, it's called Reason Revival, and it's the general name for efforts to bring science and free thought and skepticism into American politics, into how we discuss, or into how we talk about and discuss very consequential issues, from mass incarceration, police community relations, sex education, drug wars. I mean, just things that have human consequences, but they're discussed through ideology, whether it be left or right. And so the problem there is that ideology is often a fantasy-based, way to look at the world. People have the answers before they ask the questions. It doesn't allow you to accurately arrive at answers. It's a worse way to discuss problems. Whereas science and free thought is a more reality-based way to be open to evidence, be open to facts, be willing to change your mind. And that unwillingness of people to change their mind during discussing important issues is a huge problem that I think the wider science and free thought community has yet to really tackle. And so we're trying to build a bridge between science and free thinking on the one hand and our polarized American political landscape on the other. So specific updates here, there's a few of them. I'm based out of New York City, and there's a very big sort of free thinker community here, composed of several loosely connected groups. And I've been working with some really good people in these groups to sort of mobilize a wider conversation and bring in different spheres of activity, from media and activism and show business and things like that, to try to set up conversations between ideology and science, and to try to tackle the range of social justice issues such as race and gender and inequality and Islam and things like that. Issues that tend to be relegated to either, a contest between right-wing bigotry and far-left political correctness, or relegated to this sort of emerging subculture of student activism that will attack free speech and is very groupish and unwilling to question their beliefs, and tends to be based on ideology rather than any kind of Socratic way of talking. So what we're trying to set up here is very similar to the Gracie Challenge. If anybody knows anything about the history of mixed martial arts, the Gracie Challenge was simply pitting different styles against Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Jiu-Jitsu from the Gracie brothers. So it was a living experiment in what worked and what was less effective, and it showed that the Gracie, their fighting system that essentially, was based on Jiu-Jitsu was more effective. So this is sort of going to be along the same lines. We could call it the Reason Challenge or the Socratic Challenge. The idea is that issues like race and gender inequality and things like that are better answered by scientific thinking and genuine human compassion than by any kind of ideological or politically dogmatic approach. So we're going to pit different ideological approaches from the left and the right against scientific thinking as a way to arrive at answers. So we're going to update people as this comes together. We're looking at setting up some talks, some debates, some discussions using film and social media tools across YouTube as well as other forms of broadcasting, basically an alternative media to try to bring the free thinkers together, community together here in New York City, and really converge on this and try to make it eventually a nationwide movement to bring science into our political issues. And the last piece there is I'm almost finished with a formal proposal, a public proposal for this that tries to act as a roadmap. It's about, I'm going to have a short version of 3 pages, long version is going to be about 20 pages. And I'll send this out to people, and it's going to basically outline the problem of ideology and political dogma in this country and how it is hurting us, and how science and free thinking can become a special interest, a vocal and eventually funded and publicly recognized special interest that can compete with the left and the right. It can essentially, well, you can be a liberal or you can be a conservative, you can be politically biased, we all are, but the best tool is science and free thinking, and that is not currently recognized on any footing by comparison to ideology and dogma. So on any of these questions,
the loudest voices, the ones driving the bus, are very ideologically and politically polarizing voices, whereas science and free thought is always told to take a back seat. And we're trying to very publicly and vocally change that and say that science should be an interest group and should have a say in how politicians give answers to questions, such as our justice system or why we're incarcerating so many people, and does this make sense based on the evidence? And that is the best tool to arrive at answers. That should be a recognized group. So this roadmap, I'm publishing that. We're going to see if we can formalize that in some way across the secular community. The second thing is, and I'll be brief here, it's about the empowering dissidents and reformers within the Muslim world and within Muslim communities, but it is actually about trying to bring together a discussion about this across many spheres of expertise, from social media and cyber and activism to social behavioral science, to people that have the ability to make a difference on this front. And the idea is to try to converge all this under the same umbrella of discussion, and build a kind of a bridge of solidarity between liberal Muslim free thinkers and ex-Muslims on the one hand, and secular Western society on the other, and really build this kind of solidarity and get the secular community to join. So there's an organization I've talked about called movements.org, they crowdsource human rights. They're an absolutely wonderful platform, sort of like Uber or Craigslist, where there's people in closed societies that have genuine concerns from wrongful incarceration, free speech, persecution, and women's rights, and things like that. And they can request help from on a range of things they need, from editors to filmmakers to documentarians to cybersecurity, for example, with bloggers. And then people in the free world can volunteer their skills as a matchmaking tool. So it's a direct way to horizontally link the needs of people in the closed societies with the tools of people in open societies. And you can choose from thousands of different ways to help people. So I know the directorship of this organization, and they're wonderful. They got a wonderful team that do some good work. They're based here out of New York. So what I would like to do is continue talking with them and see if we can make some personal or professional introductions between movements and different people in this coalition. And then we can hone in on some specific ways. One way we're talking about is providing cybersecurity to dissidents in a way that can be scaled globally, and it can be replicated, can be taught, can be used across the web, and provide kind of a, pardon the term here, but an actual safe space for these people to talk, and sometimes to remain anonymous and avoid their information being hacked and leaked by jihadis or Islamists, as often happens. And this can't save everybody, but it can certainly help. So we're currently looking to build, and this is not set in stone yet, but I'll let everybody know if we get it together. We're looking to build a formal proposal. It would cost, roughly $4,000 or $5,000. I don't have an actual price, but this would be a way to, ideally, this can provide some cybersecurity to dissidents and to bloggers in ways that can be scalable and usable, and even in closed society. So if we can get this up as a proposal, we could probably crowdfund it very quickly, I think. I don't think that would be very difficult. So that's one example of an actionable item where people across the free world are converging on how to empower dissidents. The other thing is inculcating a movement of science and reason and free thinking within Muslim communities, often in a way that doesn't directly tackle religion, but simply brings the tools of critical thinking and taps into the history of the Islamic Golden Age, where there's a lot of Aristotle and Socratic and different philosophical traditions that were beautifully revived after the Dark Ages. And so Islam does have a rich history of appreciating science and philosophy and logic. And this coexisted and flourished quite impressively, hundreds of years ago. And there's, polls show that up to 20%, is my understanding, of people in the Arab world are closeted atheists, agnostics, and loosely speaking, free thinkers. And there are many Muslims who are very open to science and free thinking. And we need to empower these people and give them a voice. So that's the second item, is finding ways to link science, the science community and the skeptic community in the Western world with Muslims globally, to try to bring about a revival of science and free thought within the Islamic, wider Islamic sphere. And I think that's doable. It'll take time. It'll be difficult, but it'll require us to be able to work with that part of the world and be creative and you know, be diligent. So those are my 2 items. I'll follow up through emails with anybody interested and keep you updated as this sort of alternate media network springs up here in New York, and really try to get some conversation going about ideology and versus free thought. And so anyway, if anybody has any questions, you know, feel free to send.
Any questions for John?
So John,
Yeah, thanks.
John, it's Edwina. It sounds fascinating. Could you pass on to us links to how the rest of us can get involved? Whether
Absolutely.
It's group level or individual level?
Yeah, we're working to narrow that down, and I'd be very happy to do that, and I do appreciate it. I can also link people with some of my collaborators on this, and some are actually professors out of the CUNY system, City University of New York, and some are, you know, scientists, some are just activists, and some are, you know, ex-Muslims. They're a beautiful tapestry of people here in the city, and we're trying to make New York a kind of a hub for free thought that can have a friendly, if you want to call it a friendly competition with the West Coast, where, you know, they got a lot of the, you know, leading voices of the science community and skeptic community are out in California, and we're trying to make New York a kind of a friendly, you know, co-collaborator on this. So yeah, I'll definitely send that out, and I appreciate it. Same thing with the thing about Islam and movements and dissidents and free thinkers. So.
Yes, I loved both of those ideas, John, and I did share a link to movements.org in our chat window as well. I'm going to share a link to Reason Revival, and that way, at the very least, people can keep track.
Oh yeah, thank you. And I'll send out a formal public proposal about the converging on discussions about Islam and dissidents. So I got a proposal for that too. So I'll send that as well. That has some specific ways we could all share and collaborate. So
wonderful. We love specific. Thank you so much, John. I want to see if Edwina wants to take us home with any information on the conference you attended or anything else that we should know.
Sure. Okay. So I'm going to give the information that the people from Nepal sent me that they wanted to share with all the groups that are involved in Secular Policy Institute, and we can do an announcement for them in the newsletter next week. But basically, they created their Society for Humanism in Nepal. It's in Kathmandu, and it was created in 2005, and they promote humanism in accordance to the 2002 Amsterdam Declaration. And what they want us to know is that they have put together a new volunteer program to allow international people to work in partnerships with them. And they are inviting people to come to Nepal, and the volunteers will be provided with accommodation with a local family. They'll have adequate hygienic food, opportunities to be involved in a variety of the Society for Humanism Nepal projects, as well as opportunities to partake in tourist activities if they wish. So they have a flyer, and they're recruiting people who would like to go over for a couple weeks or a month or 6 months or a quarter or a year. So it sounds like a fascinating opportunity for someone who is an intrepidor and looking for something interesting to do, and they could get back to society. All right, but like I said, we will do an article about a newsletter for next week. And hopefully they can come on the call in the first week, the first Thursday of May, and give us more detail.
It's wonderful.
Now, the other topic that I said I want to tell everybody about, Madeline, is that through the PTCAN, the Parent Teacher Community Action Network, and that website, we're putting together STEM programs where we're recruiting secular parents that have children in public schools to create STEM clubs. So we're calling them STEM CAN, the STEM Community Action Network. And right now, we are getting those materials for the STEM clubs, the STEM CAN group, on our website, and we've taken some ads. We placed some ads in Craigslist on Tuesday of this week, starting in the DC area, looking for parents in public that have children in public schools that are interested in starting one of these types of groups, and we're offering them startup funding and all kinds of back office support. But there'll be a big announcement when we have it completely ready, and we'll have it in the newsletter, and we'll do a press release. So that's all I have. Well, as far as events, now next weekend I will be in Tallinn, Estonia, tabling and speaking on behalf of the Secular Policy Institute at the Rationalist Conference. And then in May, I'll be attending the IATU, International Humanist and Ethical Union event, which is, I believe it's May the 22nd, and the European Union is having one on the 21st, no, the 20th, and Malta is having one on the 21st. So I'll be representing us there. And of course, that June phone call, I'll have all the reports with what's happening with the IATU. And the May phone call, I'll have the report from the Rationalist Conference that is in Estonia.
It's great. I'm sharing the Rationalist Conference link with everyone in the chat window. And as always, Edwina, you're keeping busy, so I can't wait for the updates next time.